Hello and welcome to Viewpoints. My name is Mark Shaw, and with me today is Max Geron. Max is a lieutenant with the Dallas Police Department, and today we're going to talk about his thesis, which is on 21st century strategies for policing protests. Max, tell us a little bit about what your thesis was about.
Thanks, Mark. I looked at the response of four major cities to the Occupy movement in 2011. I looked at the city of New York, I looked at Oakland, California, Portland, Oregon, and the city of Dallas, Texas, and how they responded to that pivotal movement. As you might recall, protesters and activists came in and set up camp in parks and demonstrated for weeks on end, and it was something that policing in America had not seen as far as a united protest movement. And I thought it was important that we take a look and see what strategies and what tactics and what responses there were, and what that tells us about where we're going in our country with permitting and policing the expression of dissent.
Max, what led you to pick that topic? Did you have experience in that, or?
I had some experience in dealing with that. Dallas, as you know, is my home agency, my home city, so I was familiar with our approach and how we handled that. And it was born out of a research paper that I did during the master's program here at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security. I became very interested in how the state permits and or restricts the expression of dissent by its citizens, and how we in policing can play a role in that, and how we respond.
Okay. What findings did you come up with through your research?
It was really pretty interesting. Through looking at the four different cities, I came up with 8 different themes that rose to the surface during those case studies, some of which were a lack of traditional negotiated management. And that's where the police departments come in and put forth an effort to try to negotiate with protest leaders to achieve a desired solution for both the expression of the protesters or the activists' concerns and the maintenance of public order. I found that in some circumstances there was a lack of cohesive government leadership that was involved that played a role. Control of space, public space by the state was another theme that rose to the top, as well as emergent strategies or novel and new approaches to dealing with protest, as opposed to utilizing or relying on best practices from past events.
Okay. What are the reasons that you think your findings may or may not actually be adopted?
I think that the reasons that my findings and my recommendations would be adopted is because it focuses on strategy and communication among police and civic leaders beforehand to address protest events that will occur in the future. It doesn't rely on best practices as far as tactics, and it's applicable to both large and small agencies alike. For example, if you were to give an agency a tactic based on their personnel resources, their funding availability, that may not be a practical solution for them. Whereas giving them strategic options on how to address their population during a protest is going to allow them to fit their tactics into this strategy with what they've got to work with. Some reasons that it might not be adopted is because police culture oftentimes is slow to change, and we want to rely on best practices, things that worked in the past. We have a tendency to think are going to work in the future. But in my thesis, looking at protest and a response to protest through the eyes, or through the lens rather, of the Canavan framework, and dealing with protest as occurring in a complex adaptive environment, we see that best practices will often lead us into chaos. We saw that in Oakland. There was disjointed government leadership. There was a change of tactics back and forth, which created confusion among the citizenry and the police alike. And then they relied on what they called best practices and a militarized approach to dealing with their Occupy factions. And that led them into chaos. They had some of the most violent interactions with the public of the entire Occupy movement. In New York, again, looking at it through the eyes or the lens of the Canavan framework, they had a very simple approach. They had the availability of reassigning hundreds of officers and utilizing a mass amount of money to fund those operations to deal with their Occupy contingent and basically dictate how that was going to occur. The cities of Dallas and Portland used a complex adaptive solution and relied on intelligence fast failure, which is where they tried some things, they made some mistakes, but they quickly adapted and changed their response and achieved what was arguably a better solution, a more peaceful solution. Not to say that they didn't make mistakes, but they adjusted from those mistakes, learned from them, and adapted.
Was there anything that was controversial in your research?
There was what I termed New York exceptionalism, and that was the ability, based on their size and their resources, to move hundreds of officers and dictate and not have to negotiate or work for a solution that allowed protesters to express their dissent or their protest. There were also controversial uses of force by not only New York, but Oakland, and in some cases Portland and Dallas as well. So there was addressing excessive force and how police departments handled that. And simply categorizing the response of the largest police department in the nation as a simple response will likely be controversial.
Was there any hurdles that you had to overcome in obtaining any of your information, or was it mostly open source, or how did you come to that point, that conclusion there?
Excellent question. In many regards, I was able to rely on open records and published police reports, media accounts. And along the way, I ended up developing my own method of research, one of my own methods of research, and that was social media video analysis. And in researching the Occupy movement, because of the use of social media, and because it was so prevalent during the protests, there was an abundance of video that was available on the internet. So I compared that video with media video and police video, because some of the police departments that I studied had video cameras available and recorded their operations. I compared those with reports to get a better, more comprehensive picture of what occurred during those protests.
I've had the opportunity to look at parts of your thesis, and it's certainly intriguing, and it's very complete. But I would ask you, is there anything at this point, now that you're done and you've kind of set it behind you a little bit, is there anything that you wish that you would have added, or that if you had it to do over again, you would have included as a component of that thesis research?
You know, what really intrigued me in going through and studying this topic was basing some of my research on the works of Dr. Philip Zimbardo of Stanford University and his research into de-individuation and how putting a police officer into riot gear, protective equipment, putting on a helmet, putting on protective vests and protective shin guards, and making each officer look like the person standing to his or her left and right, and putting them online to enforce law and order. How by putting on that costume, it tends to remove part of that individuality of that individual officer, and thereby increases the chance that he or she is going to act in a manner that's different from what they would if they were acting one-on-one and engaging with an individual. I think there's a wealth of study that can be done there, and that would give police commanders and civic leaders a better understanding of when it's appropriate to put officers into that situation. Arguably, based on protest tactics and violence that could occur, there's arguably a time when that's appropriate. And if we could better equip our police leaders and our civic leaders with an idea of when that's appropriate and give them those tools, I think it would be a service to them and to the public in general.
Great. Well, thank you very much for your time, Max, and congratulations on your accomplishment. And thank you for joining us today on Viewpoints.